You're salting your pasta water, you reach for the shaker, and nothing comes out. Or maybe you're halfway through a recipe and you realize you completely forgot to grab salt at the store. It happens to everyone. And while salt is one of those things we tend to take for granted, there are actually some really solid ways to work around it, replace it, or even make your own if you're in a pinch. Today I'm covering 4 real methods, and I mean real. Not internet nonsense like just use more garlic. These are methods with actual science behind them, ranging from things you can do right now in your kitchen to what you'd do if you were genuinely out in the wilderness and needed to preserve food or season a meal. Let's get into it. The first method is the one most people overlook because it sounds too simple. Soy sauce. Now, before you say that's just a different ingredient, hear me out. Salt works in cooking in 2 main ways. It enhances flavor by suppressing bitterness and amplifying the compounds that make food taste savory and balanced. And it draws out moisture, which matters for things like curing meat or salting vegetables. Soy sauce does both of those things. It contains sodium, obviously, but it also has glutamates, which are the compounds responsible for that deep savory quality we call umami. So when you substitute soy sauce for salt, you're not just replacing sodium, you're actually adding a layer of complexity to the dish. A teaspoon of soy sauce contains roughly 900 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium, which is about the same as a quarter teaspoon of table salt. So the ratio works out pretty cleanly. The main thing to watch is that soy sauce adds color and a slightly fermented flavor, so it works better in stews, marinades, braises, and sauces than it does in something like a delicate cream-based dish or a light vinaigrette. Tamari and coconut aminos work the same way if you need a gluten-free option or something with a slightly milder flavor. The second method moves us towards something coastal, and this is where things get genuinely interesting. If you live near the ocean, or if you're ever in a situation where you need to source salt from your environment, seawater is a completely legitimate starting point. The ocean is roughly 3.5% salt by weight. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it's actually enough to work with. The process is exactly what it sounds like. You collect seawater, you filter it through a cloth or a fine mesh to remove sand and debris, and then you boil it down or let it evaporate in a shallow pan. As the water disappears, the salt is left behind. If you're doing this outdoors with a wide pan and good sunlight, evaporation alone can do the work, though it takes time. Boiling is faster. For every gallon of seawater you process, you'll end up with roughly 4 to 5 ounces of salt. It won't look like the perfect white crystals you get at the store. It'll be off-white or slightly grayish, and it may have minerals mixed in that give it a slightly different taste. But that's actually what makes things like fleur de sel or grey sea salt so prized at fancy restaurants. The important caveat here is to collect your water from a clean source away from industrial areas, sewage outflows, or heavily trafficked harbors. The ocean is not uniformly clean, and you need to use common sense about where you're sourcing from. The third method is for anyone who's interested in foraging or is in a more inland, wilderness-type situation. Certain plants contain high concentrations of sodium and have been used as salt substitutes by indigenous cultures around the world for thousands of years. The most well-known example in North America is saltgrass, a tough, low-growing grass that thrives in salt marshes and arid inland areas near salt flats. The surface of the leaves actually accumulates salt crystals that you can lick off, and historically people would dry and burn the plant and use the ash as a seasoning. Glasswort, also called sea beans or samphire, depending on where you are, is another one. It's a succulent coastal plant that tastes genuinely salty right off the stem and is actually sold in high-end grocery stores as a gourmet ingredient. Inland, wood ash from certain hardwoods contains potassium and other minerals that give a faintly salty alkaline quality. It's not sodium chloride, but it functions similarly in some cooking contexts, particularly with grains and legumes. Indigenous peoples across North America, Africa, and Asia have been making ash salt for millennia. You leach water through the ash, collect the mineral-rich liquid, and evaporate it down to a paste or powder. The result is potassium-heavy rather than sodium-heavy, which actually makes it a useful option for people watching their sodium intake. This is ancient food science, and it works. The fourth method is probably the most practical for the majority of people watching this, which is understanding how to adjust your cooking technique so that food tastes properly seasoned, even without much salt. This might sound like a consolation prize, but it's actually something professional chefs talk about constantly. Salt does something specific, but it's not magic, and you can hit a lot of the same notes through other means. Acid is the big one. A squeeze of lemon juice or a splash of vinegar at the end of cooking does something neurologically similar to salt in that it wakes up your palate and makes flavors that were flat suddenly pop. This is why a good salad dressing, even a lightly salted one, tastes bright and alive. The acid is doing work. Fat is another tool. Butter, olive oil, and cream coat your tongue and extend the time that flavor compounds stay in contact with your taste receptors, which makes seasoned food taste more intensely seasoned, even if the total amount of salt is lower. And then there's heat concentration, which means reducing sauces and cooking moisture out of vegetables so the natural flavors become more concentrated. A roasted tomato tastes far more intense than a raw one. A reduced stock tastes far more savory than a thin broth. When you combine acid, fat, and concentration, you're building flavor in a way that genuinely reduces your dependence on salt as a crutch. So to put this all together, if you're standing in your kitchen right now with no salt, your fastest solution is soy sauce or tamari, same sodium, better flavor complexity. If you're near the coast and thinking more long-term, seawater evaporation is a legitimate and historically ancient practice. If you're out in nature and need to forage, saltgrass, glasswort, and hardwood ash are real options that real people have relied on for thousands of years. And if you want to become a fundamentally better cook regardless of the salt situation, learning to use acid, fat, and concentration to build flavor is a skill that will serve you for the rest of your life. Salt is so cheap and so available that most of us never think about what we do without it. But understanding where it comes from, what it actually does, and what can stand in for it makes you a smarter cook and a more resourceful person. If you found any of these methods useful, leave a comment below and let me know which one you're most likely to actually try. And if you've ever made your own sea salt or cooked with foraged ingredients, I genuinely want to hear about that. Subscribe if you want more videos that take everyday cooking questions further than you expected. I'll see you in the next one.